Well, Franz-Stefan Gady is a senior fellow at the East-West Institute. He joins us now from New York. Thank you for your time. I just wanted to ask you about this negotiating framework that Jamila Lindegan mentioned. It's a code of conduct in the South China Sea. So it's been adopted, but it's not legally binding, as I understand it. Is it, though, a first step towards making progress on this disputed area?
Well, let me first say that any diplomatic effort that tries to diffuse this very hotly contested flashpoint in the Asia-Pacific region should be welcomed. Second, I think what you just mentioned, the fact that it's not legally binding, I think can be interpreted as a Chinese diplomatic victory, because China has been pressing this idea for some time, because China does not want this new framework to be actually a mechanism for solving any of the territorial disputes in the South China Sea. China prefers to negotiate with the different claimant states on a bilateral basis, just because China is interested in enhancing its relative bargaining power, its relative negotiating strength vis-a-vis smaller claimant states.
Just on that, so the Chinese foreign minister said that this business of creating or adopting a framework creates a solid foundation for negotiations. And he went on to say, if the situation in the South China Sea is generally stable and on the premise that there is no major interference from outside parties, which outside parties is he referring to there?
Well, I mean, he's, of course, referring to the United States, which time and again has tried to uphold the so-called international rule-based order, which the United States thinks China is violating. So the United States is not a claimant to any of the territories in the South China Sea, of course, but it has a vested national interest that this dispute is resolved peacefully. The larger point here is, of course, China being a revisionist power and the United States being a status quo power have different interests in the South China Sea, and they're bound to clash, of course, because of these divergent interests in those disputed waters.
How much is the US focused on this issue at the moment, though? Because some opponents are saying that China's kind of pushing this through at the moment while the US is distracted with other stuff. Do you think that's fair, or do you think the US does have its eye on this particular ball?
Well, of course, the United States right now is primarily concerned with what is happening in North Korea and the rapid progress of North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile program. But at the same time, of course, the South China Sea remains one of the biggest issues when it comes to the bilateral relationship between the United States and China. China, in general, has been fairly consistent in pressing its claims in the South China Sea, and it usually has tried to establish facts on the ground. And the United States right now has never really embarked on a policy that challenges those facts on the grounds. As you mentioned earlier in your report, China has built 7 artificial islands. 3 of those have been militarized, so to speak, and I think the larger issue here is that China is trying to militarize the South China Sea, is trying to deny access to U.S. military assets to the South China Sea, and I think this is one of the primary concerns for the United States in that regard when it comes to those disputed waters. It wants to operate its aircraft carriers, it wants to operate its submarines, its other military assets freely in the South China Sea, and China is trying to prohibit that from happening.
Franz-Stefan Gady from the East-West Institute, thank you very much indeed for your analysis.